Okay, there's 15 folks here watching. Hello, everybody. If you want to maximize the screen for the presentation, you can just double click on it, which is the hot tip. Hopefully you're here for the session that we're about to give you on a crash course on hiring developers. We're trying to make this like a truly a crash course. And so there's a lot of stuff we're going to cover, and we don't want to get too into the weeds about any of it if we can avoid it. There are quite a few areas where we could like give whole completely separate talks on just these specific areas. So we're going to sort of blow through this. We originally slated for 30 minutes, but Kelly politely bumped our time to 45. Hopefully we're not going to go beyond that, but just from a housekeeping timing perspective, we may be talking until about 2:30 Central Time. So all right, let's get started. So to the loose outline is that we're talking about hiring developers, but to take a step back, really what we're going to be talking about is that you need technical help. And let's talk about what your options are, and that hiring developers could be one of multiple of those options to get that technical help. We'll get into costs as far as salary ranges, hourly rates, and project-based estimates. We'll talk about a number of different trends we're seeing in the market right now. And then we'll touch on where to find candidates. And then lastly, we'll close with why you should hire a junior, or why you should be open to hiring junior. So some assumptions about who you are and who's in the room. We're assuming that you are this is a room full of aspiring and existing founders. You're entrepreneurs, you're starting your own thing. It's possible that you're already an engineering leader, or it could be that engineering is completely a black box to you. And hopefully you'll walk away with valuable information regardless of where you fall on that spectrum. We're also making the assumption that you're very busy people. And so we're going to try to really cram the information. This thing is information dense. We're going to try to cram as much information into this as possible.
We're both super fast talkers. So if you didn't have your coffee, we'll be your human coffee. We'll do it.
I don't know if your audio is sounding garbled to me, or if that's your internet or mine, but
I
think you seem okay now. I think you should be okay.
Oh, all right.
If anything weird comes out of our robot sounding speakers or whatever, feel free to drop that in the chat to let us know.
Yeah, let us know. I can't hide the chat, so we can see what you say.
Yeah, me too. Okay, so who we are. I'm Matt. I'm a software engineer and founder of the Invisible Network. I'm self-taught. I taught myself how to code about 4 years ago, and I've been doing it professionally ever since. I should mention that I also started the Minneapolis Junior Devs community group. And so I've seen the world on the up and coming, less experienced devs side of things for quite a while. I'll give you a quick summary. The Invisible Network is an anonymous job matching service. I should say I'm not a recruiter. I stumbled into this because I was trying to make the job search a better experience. And we've kind of found a sweet spot over the last year and some change, year and a half, in helping startups and early stage sort of small but growing companies hire technical folks. And so that's kind of our sweet spot. And so beyond that, I was involved in hiring both on the interviewing side and as a job seeker in the past. So I have a number of different perspectives that I bring to this conversation and this topic. And
I'm Eryn O'Neill. The picture of me on your screen is way closer to my actual skin tone. I'm an engineer. I've been a developer in the industry for about 15 years. So I've been around. And these days I'm doing more management, director level stuff. I've worked in multiple organizations and I've hired in multiple organizations. I've been a freelancer as well. So I've really seen, and I've hired freelancers. So I've really seen many sides of this process. So I'm kind of representing Matt's not a recruiter, but he's representing the recruiter side a bit. I'm representing a little bit more of the hirer side. These days, what I do is I'm a public speaker and I also teach, I give trainings on management and hiring and diversity and inclusion and things like that. So yeah, let's do this. So first, we want to take a step back. I know that you're here to talk about hiring developers, but Matt and I both have observed that when people say, I need to hire a developer, what they really mean is, I need some technical help, and I don't know any other way to get it besides hiring somebody. If you've been working in a company for any amount of, or running a company for any amount of time, you know that hiring somebody is a pretty big deal, getting somebody on your payroll. So we want to talk about some different options that you might have just to make sure that this is the thing you want to do. So you can get full-time developers, which is what the vast majority of this talk will be about. You can grab hourly developers that can look like a lot of different things: part-time, contractors, consultants. There's some nuance there. We're not going to really get into it. You can hire out a dev shop. So that's when you just pay somebody else to wholesale do the work for you. That can be a really nice option if you're a founder who just wants to solve a problem with software. You are not a founder who needs to be a software company, right? So that can definitely be the right thing to do. Sometimes it costs more, sometimes it costs less, but there's a time and a place for it. Something that's really big right now is a lot of devs or founders are going for low or no code tools. So a no code tool would be something like Squarespace. Like that's like the most basic, you know, they make the website for you, they manage it. You don't need to know a lick of coding to get your marketing site up and out there. Something like a low code tool would be if maybe you already have some technical expertise and you want to integrate that with something that can do the parts that you don't know yet. Sorry, I was looking at the chat. It's a bad habit of mine. So if you want to think about a low code tool, that would be like what the Invisible Network started as, actually. I just know because I've talked to Matt about it. It was a React front end because that was something Matt had expertise in, but it was talking to an Airtable backend. So outsourcing a lot of that backend work and just using the part he already knew about. The last thing on this list is teaching yourself how to code. And the thing about that is you should not actually do it. If you want to learn how to code, which is great with Patrick's question, if you want to learn how to code, that's awesome. But it's a profession unto itself. So I really feel like you need to choose between being a founder at this moment or learning to be an engineer at this moment. And you can also learn how to code for funsies, but don't like hold up your business on that. There's a lot of us out there who have dedicated too much time to this already. So realistically, I don't think that that's an option for most founders. If you walk in with that info, cool. If you don't, let someone else do it. So when you're trying to decide between those options, you got to narrow it down a bit. I'm going to blow through this really quick because it's not what this talk is about, but some questions to ask yourself. What are you trying to accomplish? So what are your goals here? Are you trying to just build some software that will help you run your business? Or is your business the software? Are you building a software as a solution platform? Are you doing something like that? Because that will help you determine if it should sort of be like in-house or out-of-house. How much experience do you have building software? If you're totally new to this, do not hire a developer. It's not going to go well. It's not the right solution for you. Or if you are just heck bent on hiring somebody, you're going to want somebody who's really experienced, who can like walk you through this. And there are consultants who are that's their specialty. 3, do you have a team? And if you already have a team, how strong are they? So like a larger, strong team can absorb a more junior developer. If your team is small or weak, or just like the one guy who like has been writing the code himself for 3 years and you're ready to expand, you probably want to get somebody more experienced, because you need somebody who can hold their own through that process, as opposed to needing the kind of mentorship that like a less experienced developer will. 4, what's your budget? That's a big question, and we've got a whole section about it. And 5, is this an existing project or is this something new? So if it's brand new, I would advise you to think about it more in terms of outcomes and solutions. Like, what's the problem that you need to solve? If it's something that exists, now you really have to start getting specific about like, well, what technologies does this person have to work with? How hard is it to find somebody who does that thing? But those 2 things are going to have different paths. And I know Matt also has some ideas about like moving from MVPs to like whatever. So I'll pass it over to him to finish that.
Yeah, thanks. So Eryn totally nailed it. Like, Invisible Network started with Airtable as like the database, the backend, it was everything. And it was almost like an administrative panel too. And I was in a situation where I had the skills to take, sort of like a low code option and add a little bit of code on top to sort of like put a bow on it. And that worked for me to sort of test out my hypothesis that this business had potential. And like, fast forward, a year and a half later, like we have a fully built out backend. And I mean, personally, I've done all the work myself because I have that skill set. But if you're somebody who's in a situation where you've got an idea and you need to build it, there are a lot of different options. And I should also mention that so we're not going to cover dev shops or no code options very much. You should know that Andy from Modern Logic, which is a local dev shop, he gave a talk on what to expect from developer teams last week. And I think that that'll be available in the Startup Week resource library as a recording for you to watch later. Also, Zach Steven and Alex Rodriguez, they're both really enthusiastic about no code. And they had a session on it that called No Code Rodeo. And also I think that they're starting a whole separate thing and like website about no code specific stuff. So like there are areas where like if you want to learn more, we can at the very end we'll share links to some of the resources and things that we mentioned. But we're going to focus mostly on specifically hiring developers here. So the big question in your mind is, of course, how much is it going to cost? Make sure I'm on the right slide here. Okay, so this is a very information dense slide. We're going to try to like make sure that we cover all of it. This is like combines all of my passions in one. Like it's got like helping developers level up. It's got charts and graphs and whatnot. And this is the sort of thing where like I think Eryn and I are both very passionate about making our tech community a more equitable place. And so making sure that salary expectations and reasonable, like fair salaries are things that are expected on both sides is a sort of thing that's like really, really important to both of us. I should say we haven't even really like touched on what junior dev means to us. And I think Eryn and I both independently have different definitions for what junior dev means. For this like specific purpose, when we're looking at salaries, I want to mention that entry level is a distinction between junior, because entry level is like, these are folks who have 0 professional years of experience. They're like bright-eyed and bushy-tailed, they're super green, and they're eager to learn and grow. But they're sort of at the very bottom end of the spectrum, just in terms of like being completely entry level and needing some handholding. Junior is how I refer to junior is like sort of the 1 to 3 years of experience range. And this is where these are folks with some professional experience and they're getting their feet under them. And like at the end, we'll sort of speak to why you should really, seriously consider hiring junior. That's sort of the best value for your buck. Then we get up to mid-level, which is sort of more 3 to 5 years of experience. Senior is 5 to 10, and then experienced, quote unquote, is 10 plus years. Also worth mentioning is that like we're using like these words and also these number of years of experiences as a proxy for competency levels. And competency is something that's very, very fuzzy. It's very subjective. And that like 1 year of coding experience at one company versus at another might be completely different. And the level at which somebody's going to come out of at the end of that year might be somebody's over here and somebody's down here, but they both on paper have 1 year of experience. Mm-hmm. And so we have this table with sort of some of the takeaways, the things that I would want you to sort of walk away from this presentation with. But the charts on the right-hand side, in my head, I've had anecdata to say, here's what I would recommend. And what's nice is that through the Invisible Network and in working with a number of job seekers, like more than 600 or so have added themselves to our site in the last year and some change, we've got a good amount of real live data. And this is information from job seekers, of course, anonymized because we don't want to, reveal anybody's identities, but the exact numbers don't matter. But the thing that's important is to show the trend going from top to bottom. So let me describe what you're looking at here. Yes, Paul, you're more than welcome to share it on social media and credit it. Just mention that these are Minneapolis-St. Paul specific recommendations, because some people have strong opinions about that. Like they think that salary ranges are different on the coasts versus here, and that's true, but we want to make sure that it's clear that this is the Twin Cities. Okay, so what we're looking at on the charts, and I'm sure your inclination is to like lean in close because you want to see like this really, really closely. If you want at the very end, we can get into the nitty gritty, and we'll definitely share these later, like via social media and a blog post or something too, because they're pretty compelling. But the important thing is the ranges. So like the very top is folks in that less than 1 year of experience range. Orange is 1 to 3 years of experience. Yellow is 3 to 5. 5 to 10 is green. And then the lighter blue at the very bottom is the 10 plus years of experience. And so you can see that there's this sort of like, it's almost like logarithmic logarithmic is the right way to describe it. It's like you can start your career in the 60K range, and then within 3 years, you're making six figures. And that's pretty bananas if you think about it. And like personally, like I've gone through that, going from, my first job to my second job as a dev. I got like 25% pay raise, which is not uncommon when you bounce from one company to another. And that's like, again, there's a lot here, and we could definitely get into the weeds, but the drift is like the movement between the different levels kind of shows, at the start, there's a pretty specific range that like the 60 to 80K for entry level is a good range to focus on. And that within that, I would say 70 to 75 is a good target. That's a really good place to start folks that you've, done your due diligence on and you see potential in them, because within a couple of years, they're going to be making a lot more. Junior, the range is a little bit wider. It can range anywhere from 70 to 100. And I would target something in the 90K range. Mid-level folks, you're looking at between 100 and 120K, and that 110 is a good target. Senior, 110 to 130, and then 120 is probably a good target. And then for this experienced one at the bottom, as you can see, it's kind of all over the place. Like once you hit 120, that's that first big spike, and then it just kind of goes up from there. And so, I mean, locally, I would say 140 is probably a reasonable place to target for folks with 10 plus years of experience. That was a lot. Sorry for the massive brain dump. Eryn, do you have anything to add here before we move on?
Yeah, I mean, I just kind of want to speak what creates, I would want to add a little bit more to what creates this spread. So you can see in the beginning, everybody's kind of tightly coupled because nobody, for a number of reasons, but one of them is nobody really has a specialty yet. As people get more experience, there are just components of programming, of technical work that are, for whatever reason, more highly or more lowly compensated. Either they're more in demand, or the supply is just lower, or there's some sort of cultural forces at play too that I would love to get into over a beer, but not so much right now. But there are a lot of reasons that you end up with that spread. So one of them is specialty. The other one is what area one ends up working in. So if you are like a giant bank and you want to, and Matt will get into this a little bit, but if you're like a giant bank and it's super boring and super corporate, you better be compensating highly. If you are a more interesting place to work, or you have other perks going on, or you're doing mission-driven work, you can usually offer less without actually tripping into being exploitative, which Matt will talk about shortly, actually.
Yeah, and sorry, Gaji, I hope I'm pronouncing your name right. The axes are on the left-hand side, the y-axis, that's percentage of the population, or of that specific group. And then across the bottom is the salary ranges. And so it starts at like 40K and it goes all the way up to 200K, and that's consistent across all of the different charts. And again, I mean, the point is that we want to show that salary ranges at different experience levels can start pretty narrow, and then they kind of end up spreading out slowly as you go up the experience spectrum. All right, that was salaries. And I think that people probably want to have a ton more questions about this. We can definitely nerd out over the details more later. We have those in more detail at the end. Eryn, did you have something to say, or were you just?
I was just going to emphasize that we are planning to talk for our whole 45, but then we're also planning, or almost our whole 45, but then we're also planning to stick around and do questions. So if you have questions, either write them down or throw them in the chat, and we will get to questions later.
Yep, cool. All right, so we talked about salaries at length. We're going to talk about hourly rates for like just a moment. And the thing that I want to anchor folks to is around $100 an hour. That's a pretty typical hourly rate. There are a lot of factors that would go into why that would be lower or higher, but loosely expecting that feels very reasonable. It's worth mentioning that specific technologies like that are in hot demand, like iOS or React Native, for example, are going to garner higher hourly rates because those are such in-demand skill sets, and the number of folks who have expertise in that area and are also contractors / consultants are, few and far between. Eryn, I feel like you might have some stuff to add here.
Yeah, as somebody who has done freelancing and hired freelancers, one other big like lever on the price can be the length of the contract and how guaranteed the work is. So if you're going to guarantee me a steady like amount of work, like between 20 and 40 hours for, X months or even longer, I will be more likely to take a lower rate in exchange for that stability. If you want to work with a contractor or a consultant and have it, and it's really volatile work, and you're not going to promise a certain amount, or it's just a really short time, or your timeline is very compressed, so you need them to do a lot of work, so you have to sort of pay extra to encourage them to like burn the midnight oil to make it happen. You're going to pay for that privilege. So that also is something that affects this hourly rate up or down. And I think that's all there is to say. The other element of the way that people can get compensated is project-based pricing. This could be an entire talk unto itself, so we're not getting into the deepness here either, but I just want to address it. So you can pay someone hourly, you can pay somebody a salary, or you can pay for deliverables without regard for how long it actually, how much work they put in. This is more likely something you're going to get from a dev shop, and even a lot of the dev shops are moving away from it, but you're probably more likely to get this from a shop than an individual contractor. But there are some senior folks who prefer to do this. It's also more likely if you're doing like commodity-based work. So like if what you want is like a marketing site with like 6 pages and a little bit of branding work, like somebody might have a package for that. But yeah, it's just huge variable. So I know that like hearing that it's a huge range is very frustrating. So I will like give you something. I would say it's like between like 1,000 and 1,000,000 is probably what you're talking about here. Because it is impossible for me to give you any useful information about how to figure this out, because it depends on, is this just like a brochure site, or is this like a fully web app that's got to be HIPAA compliant and like highly scalable? Like it can't answer it. So since that's hard, we're going to go back to talking about developers.
All right, so let's talk about the sort of some of the market trends that we're seeing. So the first, and this is something that I see a lot when I hear companies saying they're looking to hire developers, I ask, what experience level are you looking for? And a lot of the time the answer is, oh, we're looking for an experienced dev. And it's like, okay, that's helpful to know, but there are a lot of people who are also saying the exact same thing, which means in terms of supply and demand, experienced devs fall on this spectrum of in high demand and in limited supply. And by comparison, you've got the less experienced folks on the opposite end of the chart. So you've got, Christy from Prime is here today. You've got folks coming out of Prime and other boot camps. You've got folks going through programs in university. They're teaching themselves, like myself included. And there are a lot of folks coming up, and the chasm that we've seen between experienced folks coming up saying, hey, I'm a developer, hire me, and companies saying, okay, cool, like we'll totally give you a job. It's gotten like, it started out big and it's gotten worse, which is to say that like companies are still not necessarily positioning themselves to bring junior folks on to their teams and support them. That's definitely shifting. We're starting to see a lot of positive changes there, but that's been a chasm that's been present for quite a while. But with all of that said, just in terms of supply and demand, junior devs are over here on the high supply, low demand side, and experienced devs are on the opposite end of the spectrum. Okay, so number 2. So if you're looking at experienced devs specifically and you want to bring those folks on, what to expect? As a whole, like they're picky, they're choosy. They're looking for things like flexibility and autonomy. You definitely get a strong sense of either they're looking for high pay or they're looking for mission-driven work, sometimes both, which is kind of unrealistic. Some folks have really strong, like oddly strong preferences about working fully remote. Others have oddly strong preferences about contracting. And I think all of that adds up to like, they really want to work on their own terms. Like these are folks who are seasoned and experienced. They know that they have marketable, valuable skills that are in hot demand and have been in hot demand for a while. And so they have the luxury of being able to say, I will or I won't do that, or I will or won't work on these terms. So as we already kind of like touched on, when you're hiring these folks, you have to seek them out. They're not going to come to you. And then lastly, from a demographics perspective, this is largely white men. And when we say white cis men, that means not trans, which is to say that was assigned to them at birth, so to speak. Okay, so looking at junior devs, they're looking for opportunities to learn and grow. They want mentorship, they want supportive environments, and they want learning opportunities. And this is something that I think both of us have really strong, like this is near and dear to both of our hearts. And I know that Eryn has more recently gone through the hiring process, so I'll let her take it from here.
Yeah, so when you are hiring a junior position, expect to be overwhelmed. You're going to get a lot more applications or responses to your job listing, the lower the experience requirements are. And the applications you get are often going to be a little hard to sort through, because it's a lot of people who have really similar experience and really very little experience, right? So just sort of prepare yourself for that. I advocate for companies to have different hiring or interview paths for less experienced developers versus more. I think that like a lot of places will just have like, this is how we hire. But if you are hiring somebody who has very little experience, it's just the way that you interview them is just going to have to be different, because there's like different kind of questions that will be useful. You're going to have a lot more people to sift through, and the resumes are largely they're going to be less detailed and give you less of a picture of the candidate than they will for an experienced person. So you'll want to have a different process that recognizes that. Oh man, somebody just asked in the chat what leads right into the thing I was about to talk about, which is—
Thanks, Joe.
Thanks, Joe. I think that so he asked about whether or not code interviews or code tests or anything like that are good. I have a lot of strong feelings about them that I don't have time to fully get into. So again, with the beers, but what I do think is that it is not appropriate or a good idea to put a code interview screener up front unless it is very basic. There are companies who will say, here's a 1 hour, 2 hour, 4 hour plus project that you need to do before we're even going to look at your application. And I get that. I get the temptation there, because that's a very easy way to winnow down how many applications you're getting. However, you're going to falsely reduce the kinds of people that are coming in, and you're going to reduce the demographic diversity of what's coming in, which is a huge advantage of hiring junior devs. So if you want to go to the sweet chart, Matt.
Sorry, I was trying to respond to Paul. Thanks for distracting me, Paul.
Only one of us can drive the presentation. It's kind of a weird Whoops. Side effect of this method of doing it. So if you look at this chart, this is data from Stack Overflow. And Stack Overflow does a survey of developers every year. It's certainly got things you can critique about it because it's opt-in, and the Stack Overflow community is notorious for not being particularly welcoming. But I would not don't take the percentages here as gospel, but the trends are accurate and useful. So if you look on the right, we have very experienced people, and that big blue bar is white men. So the vast majority, over 80% of the respondents were white men. And then the other marginalized groups, so different genders, different ethnicities, are the other colors. As you move towards the left, you've got the junior, the less experienced somebody has, the more likely you are to have a demographically diverse candidate pool, or demographically diverse group of people who are doing the job. So when we're thinking about hiring juniors, that is one huge strength, is that if you want to get more diversity into your workplace, that's a great place to look. And by putting a code test up front that is like excessive, you will be taking out people who don't have the luxury of doing it, basically. Because if you think about it, like, they are applying to many places. Like, junior devs are sending out lots of applications. And if yours requires a 4-hour coding test, and they have a job, like they're still at their old job, or they're a parent, or like any millions of things that keep them from having the luxury of like coding for that long on this thing that may or may not even get them an interview, it's going to shoot yourself in the foot, and you're going to start seeing as homogenous an application pool from your juniors as you will from your more experienced people. So
yeah, I feel like this is one of those topics where like you and I both have like really strong feelings and opinions.
Oh, yeah.
And, we can try to touch on it at the end, because I think it'd be a good, worthwhile discussion. And like, maybe that's like maybe that's what we talk about it anymore. I don't know. We'll see.
We'll see.
Okay, so trend number 4 is that we're seeing, this is a really positive trend. We're starting to see employers wanting to diversify their teams. And that's really great. And like on the one hand, you have these early stage small companies that want to build diversity in from the beginning, which is absolutely fabulous. Like with the Invisible Network, as a white man in tech, like that's explicitly what I'm trying to do too. And that I know that I need to build it into our DNA so that when we bring additional folks on full time, that folks who don't look like me and bring different perspectives to the table are part of the group, so that it doesn't end up being a situation like the other end of the spectrum where you've got established companies that look around and they say, oh gosh, we really missed the mark. Like we're an extremely homogenous group. And whenever we're hearing folks, so with the Invisible Network, like one of the things that we do is everything's anonymous. So we're both protecting privacy and reducing bias in the process of making connections between job seekers and employers. And so when employers come to us and they say, hey, we're looking to, grow our team and diversify as we do it, these early stage companies, it's like, yeah, you're doing everything right. This is great. For established companies, there's kind of like a red flag to me that you've gotten this far and it hasn't been a priority until now. And to that, I say, like, you kind of need to take a look in the mirror and figure out how you got here. And I mean, a lot of the times you hear things like, oh gosh, we need development help. Like we need help yesterday. We need somebody experienced because we don't have the time to, really like provide a lot of support. And that like definitely perpetuates the thing of experienced devs, which are largely white men, getting those dev jobs, and then you grow your team, and then you end up with a team full of white dudes. And that's definitely what I think, hopefully, most folks want to avoid. Mm-hmm. Oh no, go ahead. Do you have something to
say? Just because Paul touched on this in the chat, and I want to also bring it up, is that one reason that established companies get homogenous is the network effect. So one hires the people that they are already in a network with, and people tend to network with people who look and have a similar background to them. So going back to those junior devs, when you're going to get a ton of applications and you're trying to find shortcuts for sifting through them, a natural human bias is to look for people who feel familiar and reflect your own characteristics back to you. And that is not necessarily the same thing as finding people who have the things that will make them successful in the role. So that's something to be aware of, is that this network bias is what gets you to the right half of this slide, is having a company that you look around and you're like, crap, we're all very similar.
Yeah, and not to name names, but like that's I feel like that's a very common thing that you see a lot, especially here in Minnesota. Mm-hmm. So to sort of, I don't know, to bring this back to where we were going with this, there's a really good quote that I heard from Marnita Schrodel from Marnita's Table last year, and she's amazing, and she kind of said like diversity isn't just having a seat at the table. It's showing up somewhere and seeing that this place was designed with me in mind. And hearing that quote to me was like, oh gosh, like that makes so much sense. It's not just that there's one person on the team who looks like me. It's that the place feels like I belong here. Like I'm meant to be here, and it was designed with me in mind. And this leads right into our next trend, which is that we're starting to see employers shift their hiring practices to explicitly try to diversify their team. So they're shifting what they're doing to bring junior folks on, which is really good, but it's not as simple as just having them in the room. Like if you hire, I feel like Paul is the person who gives this example, like hiring a junior dev and putting them off in a corner by themselves. It's like they're a plant, and they're not. You got to water your plant. I'm pretty sure I'm stealing this like almost verbatim, and I'm butchering the wording, Paul, but I'm pretty sure this is a thing that Paul says all the time. And so it's not just as simple as bringing a junior dev onto the team. You really need to make sure that you put them in a position to succeed. And this is totally something that like we could have a whole separate talk to cover in full. But the biggies are that you kind of need to like take a step back and reassess how your culture and processes work, so that at the very beginning, like when you're interviewing, you're removing bias from your process and you're assessing candidates consistently and fairly. And that once they're on board on the team, you've got a culture of mentorship, like do you pair program, coding reviews, that sort of thing. Like, and then beyond that, it's like making sure that it's clear how they level up. You've got engineering ladders and that sort of thing, so that they're both on the team and also are put in a position to succeed. And I'm sure that there are other things you might want to add, Eryn, but this is a very big topic that I think we could definitely both uh, talk a lot more at length about.
Yeah, I could definitely dive in here. And my instinct is to, instead of say everything on the top of my head, I will wait and see if there are questions about it, and we'll get into it more deeply there.
Okay, cool. So last trend, this is the thing that I feel like everybody is feeling profoundly right now, and it's that COVID has turned everything on its head. And so the trends that we're seeing as far as like employers and job, especially on the job seeker side, is that job seekers, they're expecting to work remote. They're looking for flexibility and understanding and feeling like they're supported in case something weird comes up. It's like the number of people who are all of a sudden doing childcare and helping their kids learn virtually is astronomical through the roof. And as somebody who doesn't have kids myself, I'm not living through that experience, but I imagine quite a few folks in this room can. And then lastly, like we're seeing a lot more folks say they're explicitly looking to do meaningful work. Like they want to make a difference. They're seeing a lot of bad stuff happen in the world, and they want to actually have something to do with making the world better. So those are the trends, and we'll again lots of time for. Hopefully, we'll be able to cover these things in Q&A at the end, and we'll talk about where to find candidates. And I don't remember if we had really called out who was going to talk about what, but
I'll talk about this because you're going to talk about the next one for sure.
Cool.
So when you're hiring, there are lots of places you can find candidates, which sounds like obvious until you do it, and then you go there and you're like, crap, I forgot everything. So once we get this slide ready, just like take a screenshot of it because it will be helpful. So you put things up on your career page. That's sort of table stakes, and then share on social media. Those are two things you should do. However, a lot of people stop there. And for those to be effective, you need to have a strong enough brand that people are paying attention to you, which requires legwork. And it requires legwork before you get to the point of hiring. And even if you've put in that work, and a lot of companies have, there are a lot of companies around town that they really do just need to tweet out that they're hiring and people will apply. They busted butts to get to that point. And you still have that network effect of the people who opt in to pay attention to what you're doing are probably similar to the people who have opted in or the people who are already there, right? So if you're worried about casting a wide net in all of the possible candidates, you can't rely on this network effect. Another option that's free is sourcing candidates yourself. So like playing headhunter for your own business. If you want experienced candidates, you probably have to do this. So there's an element of this that is going to be dedicated, like limited to your network, because you can only find the people, like only source the people you know about. But message, like DMing people on Twitter, doing all sorts of stuff that, like anything that will put you on someone's radar that isn't publicly explicitly looking. Because with senior candidates, you're almost always going to be taking them from a job they have and convincing them to come over to your place. It is much less common that someone with who is a senior employee or senior experience level developer is like, I'm on the market. They're usually more like, I've heard it referred to as they've got like the defenses down. So they're like, I'm not like leaving, but if you convinced me, I would jump ship. Like, so what you want to do is find the people who've like pulled down those defenses and like hit them with a message at the right time. So that can be a really, really excellent way to find, frankly, the strongest candidates I've ever hired. That is how I've gotten all of them. So paid options, these are more likely to be what you end up using because the first ones are a lot of luck. So you've got job boards, LinkedIn and Indeed are pretty obvious ones, but there's also TechMN, which is a local tech website that has a pretty solid job board. I've used it before as an employee or employer. There's also Black Tech Talent, which Matt, I'll let you talk about that one because I don't know as much about it.
Yeah, totally. So Black Tech Talent, they're founded by a local entrepreneur named Mike Jackson, and he actually is like the local organizer for Blacks in Tech. And he's awesome. And Paul shouting out Mike Jackson. So he started this Black Tech Talent org recently. And so if you're looking to diversify your team and you're looking for a job board where you can share your opportunities, Black Tech Talent would be a 100% great place for you to start. And I should also say, like, as far as what you were just talking about with sourcing, Eryn, it's almost like what with the invisible network, what we've seen is that most experienced devs are sitting in this situation where they get like hit up by recruiters like blind, like they're good recruiters, they're bad recruiters, but like they get hit up by recruiters like in an unsolicited fashion almost all the time. And it's almost like, to your point about like letting your guard down, like your defenses down slowly, like the term I would use is that they're like passively looking. And usually what happens is like they get an offer they can't refuse and they jump ship. It's not like they go out and say, oh man, I lost my job, I'm looking for a new dev job, and I'm an experienced developer over here. I wanted to mention that because you spurred it in my head.
Totally.
Okay, so more paid options. There are hiring marketplaces, things like Vettery or Hired. I've heard a lot of mixed, like I've heard bad things about Vettery, but on both sides. Like I've heard Vettery is very pushy, both with job seekers, and they have aggressive sales tactics, which are kind of in your face. And Hired is, I met somebody from Hired last year, and it was a very odd experience as a whole. So I've heard mixed things about Hired. And I will mention that with hiring marketplaces, like their fees are traditionally something in the realm of like 15%. And there's also a newer org called Black Tech Pipeline, which is run by someone named Paris Athena on Twitter. And they started actually just right around the same time as Invisible Network. And everything they're doing seems phenomenal. So one of the things that we mentioned about, bringing junior folks or bringing folks from marginalized communities onto your team, it's like you really want to make sure that they're well supported. The thing that Paris does that's amazing is that in addition to sort of making connections, she'll check in with the job seekers over the ensuing 90 days to make sure that they're still having a good experience, and they'll share candid, critical feedback with that employer. And so I really want to meet Paris because I love what she's doing, but you should definitely check her out. It's worth noting that like Black Tech Talent, Mike is here and local in Twin Cities. Black Tech Pipeline, I think that they're mostly based and have roots in Boston. So depending on your location and where you're looking, one or the other might be worth pursuing or not. And then external recruiters, we have one of them here in the room today, Paul DeBeddings, and another person who we know and like is Heather Olson. So Paul DeBeddings is the Minnesota headhunter. You see his face in the chat, so I won't introduce him beyond that. Heather Olson, she specializes in sort of like diversity, equity, and inclusion oriented recruiting. And I believe she's like just sort of like a solo on her own independent recruiter. And her wheelhouse is sort of more in the realm of like agencies and creatives. And she's really great, like just one of the nicest people you've ever met. I should say, I personally, like the word recruiter to me, like I have a visceral reaction to the word. And so not every recruiter is good, not every recruiter is bad. I think the unfortunate thing is that there are a lot of bad ones out there and they give the good ones a bad rap. And so Paul is somebody who's so active in the community, and he's so happy and eager to give his time and share his advice, like as a friend and person, not so much as a person who's trying to make money off of you. And I think that like Heather and Paul definitely both share that sort of warm and fuzzy feeling. Like they're both people that I could just have a conversation with and I feel good about talking to.
And I'll throw out there that if you are thinking of going through a recruiter, a really good way to find good ones is to ask the employees you currently have or other seniors that you know about, senior developers that like your buddies, because I just anecdotally have found that like by a certain point in one's career, you do have like as a developer, one or two recruiters who it didn't suck to work with, and you kind of like have them in your pocket and follow them around. And so if there's a recruiter that someone you know actually wants to work with, that is a really good sign that they're going to help source candidates more effectively, and that they will maybe be better for you to work with too. So asking around for recommendations on that can help sift some of the wheat from the chaff.
Yeah, and Paul is dropping in the sort of different types, like the terms. So I appreciate you schooling us, Paul. I just looked and I realized we're at almost
we got
at 45 minutes now, so we got to go quick. There's like 2 more slides. This is going to go fast. And then we'll try to do Q&A. From what I understand, the session isn't going to get like abruptly cut off. It's not going to be listed on the list of sessions anymore. So if you're in here and we're still talking, we should be okay for a little bit, but we'll try to be quick. So here we go. So this is where I'm going to aggressively, shamelessly promote the Invisible Network, which is my thing. It's sort of like an anonymous inverted job board where you're looking at a list of people, not jobs. So these are all people who have raised their hand and said, I'm looking, I'm like open to new opportunities, I'm quote unquote passively looking. Maybe it's that their defenses are down, so to speak. But they've like sort of answered a number of questions to help define who they are and what their dream job looks like. And now they're listed on our site. And we're kind of flipping the dynamics on the model so that instead of them applying to work at your company, you're requesting to meet them. And so what we do is we explicitly do double opt-in introductions. So if an employer wants to meet a job seeker, we'll check with the job seeker to see if there's mutual interest. And from there, we'll make an introduction if so. If not, nothing happens. And so that's sort of our model. Our pricing is that like we can't promise anybody anything. And so we charge a 10%, a standard 10% success fee on hire, which comes with a refund, a 60-day refund window and all that. And so if you want to learn more about the Invisible Network, just based on like what little you've heard about me and what we're doing, check it out. The URL is invisiblenetwork.com or Google it. But that's my like one shameless plug, and we'll get back to the sort of closing content here.
And Matt's not paying me to say this, but I will say that I've used Invisible Network actually on both sides, but specifically as an employer hiring somebody, and it was like wonderful. It was a very nice experience and an excellent hire. So you don't pay anything unless it actually goes through. So there's really no downside to just checking it out and trying it.
Well, thanks, Eryn.
You're welcome. We didn't practice that. I just like put that in there.
Look at that. Yeah. It feels so genuine too. Good. Okay, so here we are. We're closing. This is like the ulterior motive here is that we really want you to walk away with like, here's the case for why you should be open to hiring junior. Number one, there's a large pool of very diverse candidates. Number two, these folks are motivated and eager to learn. Number three, because there's so many, like your time to hire is going to be a lot shorter than if you're looking for somebody who's got a lot more experience. And this is like they're kind of a blank canvas, which is to say they don't have bad habits yet, and you can sort of mold them into exactly what you need. This is something that like, imagine if somebody getting a job at your company was like winning the golden ticket at the Willy Wonka chocolate factory. It's like if you have a training or onboarding program that's really well done, it's just good branding for your business. And so if a junior dev gets a job at your company, like if that's the golden ticket, like that's huge because everybody knows that you're doing this really good thing to support your community. You can hire two junior devs for the price of one senior. And again, like here are recommended targets, 70K is a starting salary for somebody who's entry level versus 140K for a very experienced developer. Like it kind of makes sense if you're in a position to support those folks. You're giving back to the community. And then lastly, like where do you think experienced devs come from? Like today's junior devs are tomorrow's experienced devs. Mm-hmm. And there are definitely folks who are coming out of like sort of the initial cohorts of Prime from 4 years ago. And those folks are like right in that sweet spot of like 3 to 5 years of experience. And they're very, very talented and very capable. And if you had hired them a couple of years ago, it's like, here's where they are now.
One other thing I'll throw in here that I probably should have written on the slide is that a lot of so there's multiple reasons somebody would be early in their career. Sometimes it's because they're straight out of college with their CS degree or whatever, and sometimes it's because they're a bootcamp grad who's doing a like mid-career switch. And so another huge advantage of hiring junior is that you or at least something people should be thinking about is like a bootcamp grad who's got 10 years of professional experience in some other field is not truly coming in with no experience, right? Like they know how to work in a corporate environment. They know how to take care of themselves and get things done and write TPS reports and all that stuff. They just have to learn the programming part. And so like, if you can snap up one of those people for like dirt cheap dollars, that's a huge good value. So that's something to keep in mind too, is that the junior candidates will often be highly talented people who just still need time working on the coding part of what they're doing. The other one though, what I want to drop, and then I'll actually let us be done, is we've been talking about junior candidates as diverse. And I hate that people sometimes have like talk as though all experienced developers are white dudes and all junior devs are like queer Black women, right? Like that's totally not accurate. There is statistically more likely to be whatever, but like there are plenty of talented Black developers who have tons of experience. There are plenty of talented female developers who, like, I've got 15 years experience, right? There's just fewer of us. And we have the same choosiness as all of the other seniors, right? So like, don't think that they don't exist from the way we're talking about. Just recognize that like your odds are better if you're going junior.
Yeah, I put our contact info up so that the folks who are like, hey, this is great, I gotta go.
Yep.
In case you want to jot down how to reach us, I'm Extravagant on Twitter, and my email is just matt@invisiblenetwork.com. And Erin's what? Erin O? Is that how you
Eryn,
pronounce it?
yeah, Eryn O. It's very
Yep,
creative.
very nice.
Yeah, so we'll do questions now. Thank you to everybody who's saying nice things in the chat. It really makes my heart happy. Matt and I are planning to stick around for a few minutes to answer questions. We will be here till they kick us out of the room or people don't have things to ask. So people were asking things through the talk. We tried to either address we tried to address all of them either in the chat or while we were talking. If there's a question that you still want us to come back to, you can ask to chat. You can I don't know how you do it, but you can request to have your face on the screen. That sounds fun. If you don't want to do that, you can just write it in the chat. So whatever you want to do.
I wrote down a short list of some of the things that came up. So Patrick wanted to know how I taught myself how to code.
Oh, yeah, you should answer that one while people are typing up their questions.
Yeah, and then there was a question about coding exercises, which we can really get into if we want to. And then Paul asked about, he had a specific question about hiring managers, and you kind of touched on this one already about, recruiting through your network as a way to filter folks. So while if you have specific things that you want us to talk about at length or whatever, drop them in the chat. How I learned to code. So I'm like the epitome of what Eryn just described. It's like I was a data analyst and I had like 8 or 9 years of professional experience as a data analyst in tech before I transitioned my career into software. I taught myself how to code. I didn't go through a boot camp. I didn't go through, a program or whatever. It was hard. It was really hard. And like you feel stupid the whole time. And like the dirty little secret about being a developer is that you feel stupid all the time, and that's just a normal part of the process, and you get more comfortable with that, and that you're really just learning how to learn. And so for me, teaching myself how to code was sort of reinforcing the important habits that I perpetually use today. How my approach was, I focused on Ruby and Rails, and I like that because it was a very concise, it's like intuitive. There's not a lot of extra like visual noise when you're looking at the code, and it made a lot of sense to me. Depending on who you talk to, everybody's going to give you a different recommendation for what language to start with. So I would say maybe try a couple and just focus in one that feels right to you and go from there. Beyond that, we could have a whole conversation. If you're still on the call and you want to reach out, feel free to email me, and I'm happy to share my story and experience with you and talk through what you're trying to do later. Okay.
We had just had like a million awesome questions just happened.
Great. All right.
Yeah. So Paul asked, post boot camp grad, like let's say somebody's got out of Prime, what are they going to want to learn next? So there's a lot of good answers to this. AJ dropped one in the chat that I think is an excellent answer. So he said AWS, Google Cloud, Azure, some kind of cloud stuff. I agree with that. It's good to have some familiarity with the platforms because that's just like a nice level up. If I, as a hiring manager, like it helps me trust that you can learn this stuff and get going just like that much faster. My personal answer to people who are like, hey, I'm a junior grad or a junior dev, I want to get a job. I'm kind of having trouble. What should I do to like prove that I can do this? I am always looking for proof that you know how to build software like in real life. So this is even more salient for like 4-year grads, which I'm a 4-year grad myself. So I want to know that you have experience using source control, that you test your software and you understand manual QA, and if you've done automated testing, even better. I want to understand that you can work with other people. And so like coding standards matter to you, like that you've got experience implementing APIs and like maybe defining them. So like those are a little bit fuzzier, but looking towards things that can prove that you can work with other people building software in the real world, not just like in your own little GitHub repo, and that you can do it end to end so that you like understand how to start a thing and like make it something that you would actually launch. Like you don't have to be an expert at every part of that by any means, but if you can demonstrate that you have a sense of that arc, you're a much stronger candidate than somebody who's just like, well, here's like my exercises from Prime and my portfolio.
Yeah, I have strong feelings and opinions here too. And My gut reaction to the idea of going from a boot camp and getting straight into cloud stuff is like, oh gosh, no. Um, and I say that because I kind of ended up like accidentally doing that. So my focus was Ruby and Rails, and I was like, okay, this is what I like. I'm going to keep going deep into this instead of going for breadth. Um, and in my first dev job, I got put on a team that was like sort of half platform folks, half engineering folks, half software engineers, and I ended up like being tasked with stuff in the realm of like Puppet and Ansible, and the amount of like I gave that a solid college try, and that was downright the wrong thing for me. It
Yeah.
was the wrong thing for me personally, and so I should say like there are definitely folks like Ian Coldwater is a great example of somebody who like went to Prime and then went off into this like DevSecOps world and is absolutely crushing it. And so it very much depends on the person. But for me, if you're coming up with experience in specifically just JavaScript, and you want to continue to focus your time and energy on development, I would say learn a different specific development language. Like if you're
That's a
interested in
good
Ruby,
answer
you're
too.
interested in Python, those might be great places for you to expand outward. So for me, I went from Ruby Rails and I expanded into JavaScript and React. And that worked great for me because I expanded from the back end towards the front end. And I knew that like cloud AWS DevOpsy stuff was not necessarily where I wanted to spend my time. And so like in building the invisible network, like I host the whole thing on Heroku, and that problem is solved for me.
I will say
that
that like learning Heroku also counts. Like in terms of like answering this question, like that's part of that end to end, right? And it's like you don't have to be an expert at any of this stuff. Like I would never tell a junior that they should be learning, they like have to learn Puppet and Ansible like that. I don't even like using those, and I've been doing this a long time. Like they're super complicated. But knowing like how to navigate the AWS console and like launch your code into the cloud, that's good, and that gives you a leg up on people who can't.
Yeah, totally.
Cool.
Okay, let's see. Code exercises. Oh, this is a loaded one.
Oh my gosh,
Okay,
it's such a
so
big
Eryn,
topic.
so so Eryn and I like I have a strong opinion about the right way to do it, and it's based on my own lived experience going through interviews, and that so it's like it's my strong opinion is based on my own personal preference. I think Erin's opinion is that it depends, and I will say like for me, the best end-to-end experience that I've seen was an in-person pair programming coding exercise. And this was like when I was working at Granicus, that was one of the parts of like there was an in-person interview and there was a coding exercise. And both of those happened in person on the same day, which is a lot. It's a lot in one day. But the nice thing about an in-person pair programming exercise is that you can see how they take feedback. You can hear them talk through how they solve the problems. And you're there to answer questions and to ask questions to make sure that they don't end up going down the wrong path. And by comparison, like I had a take-home coding exercise that I was given that was like, oh yeah, it takes like 2 hours. I spent 10 hours on it over a weekend, and I was miserable the entire time. And so
They're never how long they say.
Yeah, they're no exactly. And then so there was another company that did this thing that was like magic, and it was like once I talked to a recruiter, the next step was get on a 30-minute call with an engineering manager. And he shared like a web-based IDE editor with me, and he said, all right, here are some tests, like make them pass. And it was really simple, and it was like a very quick thing that's like, okay, if you actually know Ruby and Rails, you'll be able to do this quickly. And it was a 30-minute thing, so there was a time constraint on it, and that would presumably be a really good way to weed out, is this person somebody who we want to bring in for like a full-blown meet everybody on the team interview or not. So that's my angle. That's my opinion.
And so those are like three really good options. There's more that I've done that are really good too. Rather than get into all of them because I want to, but I want to respect time, I will say that I think the most important thing to do is to think about the candidate's experience the whole way through. Like you selling somebody on your company starts with when you put that job description up and then what that process is like. So a little bit of empathy for what they're feeling through that can really help answer some of these questions. So if you think about like, oh, should I have a 4-hour coding exercise up front? As a candidate, that sucks. Like that just sucks. Like there's no good thing about that. And so that is, for the reasons I've already said, not something I advocate. The one way to get around accidentally creating something that sucks is to have flexibility. So there are companies that will basically be like, we have a take-home test, or you can do an in-person pairing. And there are really valid reasons that people strongly prefer one or the other. So rather than try to have like, what is the perfect, what is the perfect way to interview? It's like, if you just offer both and let them choose, that will help you not accidentally exclude somebody who just like, you didn't think about why that would not be a great part of the candidate journey. And it makes your company look really nice, because even during the hiring, you're not saying like, companies can definitely be like, have a "you're lucky that we're even interviewing you" kind of taste to it. And it's like, okay, well then once you hire somebody, like that doesn't like it doesn't feel good. Like it's not a good introduction to your company. And so giving that flexibility is sort of the opposite of that. It's being like, we respect you, we respect your time, we respect your preferences. Both of these are good. The other thing that I'll say is, if you, whatever you do, whether it's like Matt said, those exercises, a take home at the end, I really like take homes at the end. If you're going to do them, like wait till both parties are invested, and there's a reasonable chance you're going to hire this person before you ask them to do a bunch of unpaid work. Whatever you end up doing, test the test with real people before you send it out. So like if you say it's a 2-hour exercise, get somebody who works for you to do it and tell you if that's true or not. And then also take into account, like, are they significantly more experienced than the people we're looking for, whatever. But like, it's a lot of work to get a good hiring process. So if you're thinking like, wow, that sounds like a lot, then yes, that's because it is. And that's just true. Like you can have a bad hiring process by just like cargo cult doing what you see other people do, or you can think about it and put in a lot of work on these exercises or whatever you choose to do. And it will take forever to set it up. But it will be worth, like, it's an investment. It's an investment in the person you're hiring, and it's an investment in your hiring process, because you're going to get to reuse that work.
You're really selling it, Eryn.
Whatever. Good things are hard and worth doing. So like, I don't know, you can cut corners, but you're going to pay for it. So you make your choices.
Yeah. I feel like, I mean, this is also weirdly like one of those like branding marketing opportunities. It's like, if you treat your candidates with respect, even the people that you don't even hire or reject, if you treat them with respect, that's going to get around to other people.
People talk.
And that, like, people totally talk. And it's like, it's weird because like if the standard is that it's a crap, like most interviewing and onboarding experiences are pretty crappy, if you do a moderately okay job, that makes you a cut above the rest, which is like a really weird way to think about it. But like, this is not something that if you haven't thought through it, like, it's probably not an ideal experience.
Well, and also one thing to think about with your junior pipeline experience is that like today you're getting 100 applications for every role, but in 3 years, if your company's hopefully still around, they're going to be the more experienced people, and they're going to remember if you were shitty or not. So like,
totally,
it's just future proofing your process to treat your junior applicants with the same amount of respect as you would treat like the more experienced people.
Yep. And I mean, from my own personal experience at Granicus, they exclusively hired junior. And what was nice was that they had a very clear and streamlined process, and they were able to build up their process explicitly around, we always explicitly bring folks in who are on the, either they don't have any professional experience, or they have like maybe like a year or two. And that allowed them to tailor it and be consistent. And, you get economies of scale is the wrong word for it, but they were able to refine and make their process more effective and efficient because they were consistent about it. And so that's one other additional thing to consider. Okay. A couple quick questions that we can bang out quickly. Sharon Meyer asked about invisible network. So yeah, Eryn already answered this, but it covers basically anybody, presumably like if you're a tech company, what roles might you need to fill? Like invisible network theoretically has folks listed on the site for any of those roles, but we've found most of our success with tech roles. So engineers, DevOps folks, that sort of thing. I will say, I lost my train of thought, but there's a decent chance we can help. But
I know that I've seen like soft tech roles on there, like project managers and product owners and that kind of thing too. So like there's and executives and management and leadership and stuff too. So it's all very much like tech, like adjacent stuff, but it's not purely code slingers.
Yeah, it'll expand more in the future. Like it definitely reflects our network, like the folks on the teams is networks, which is tech in the Twin Cities. But the hope, and that's where we've had success, and that the hope is that it's going to expand in the future. Joe asked another a lot more questions. And Joe, maybe we should talk offline.
I have an actually short answer to the 4-year versus bootcamp question.
Sure.
I have a million thoughts, but here's my short answer. A 4-year grad has absolutely almost 99% of the time, has no professional experience, does not know how to be an adult in the workplace. And that is part of what you're going to be teaching them. And that is part of what we expect that is going to be like, we don't even think about that when we're hiring. We just know that like they're basically a teenager that's walking into adulthood, right? But they have hopefully a pretty well-rounded background. The trade-off of a bootcamp grad is reversed. So they are probably a grown-up with like experience being professional, possibly white collar work, maybe a not white collar work, but they like are at a point where they're like, wow, I want to get a career going. The opposite side of that is that they don't have as well-rounded a background. They have like a very specific education in a specific set of like a specific stack. So what they're going to have to learn is more the tech stuff, but you don't have to teach them how to be like how to operate in the working world. They have a sense of that. So it's really those two variables and like flipping them.
Yeah, and I think the one thing that neither of them have is professional work experience. Like you might get
like as a developer, you mean?
Yeah, and like that's the thing that you can't substitute, right? Like things like learning Git and version control and how to work on a software team. Those are things that you kind of have to pick up on a team in a team environment. And I feel like there's no real substitute for actually doing the work. And so you just kind of have to expect that they're going to need some time to get up to speed no matter what. Like no person
for sure
with minimal experience is going to come in and just know how to knock everything out of the park from day one.
Right. Well, at best they can memorize like a bunch of best practices, but they don't have any innate sense of like why we're doing that thing the way somebody who has like blown away the branch or like crashed production, like we understand it like in our bones, and they just don't have that yet. So
yeah.
Okay.
I have a story about that. Sorry.
Everyone has a story. Yeah, no, go on. That's the thing. They don't have that story yet. That's the difference between like less experienced and more.
Yeah. Well, okay. Here's the show. So Minneapolis Junior Devs in October, I think every year we're going to do an event called Developer Horror Stories, and that stuff exactly like what you just said, like dropping database tables in production sort of stories. And the goal here is to like have folks who are seasoned and experienced, and even junior folks too, share some of the things that they've done that are like mistakes. And it's perfectly okay like because everybody makes mistakes. Yeah, it's totally normal to make mistakes like that. And that's just a normal thing that happens. And hearing if you're bright-eyed and bushy-tailed and you haven't made a lot of mistakes yet, you might think, oh gosh, the world is ending because I got a bad code review. And it's like, nope, totally fine. That's a totally normal thing. But it's like you just have to go through it enough times to know that that's normal.
I made a mistake in production that cost my company tens of thousands of dollars, and then I continued to work there for 3 years. Like, this is just part of business. I mean, I made it, then I went back and made sure no one could ever make that mistake again. But like, it's just part of it.
Yeah, I think we might only have one more question, and that's the one from Joe. Does anybody else have anything else before we wrap up with Joe's question?
I like have no answer for Joe's question because I think it's super specific to the technology. That's my answer.
Yeah,
like find somebody who knows about React and React Native and ask them.
Yeah, no, I think Joe. I mean, you asked your question in a leading way, and the answer is yes. Like React Native is something it's very technology specific. And so if you know what the tech is that you're looking for experience with, and you're able to find stuff that's related or comparable, or if you have experience in this area, like you'll be able to pick it up faster, like find those people if you're having trouble finding those those React Native folks. Again, that's like, those are very specific things. So if you wanted to talk about specific technologies, like these are the sort of things that I see on a regular basis, and I can probably make some recommendations. But React experience would be a good comparable thing to look for if you're not finding React Native. Oh, woo. I think we've talked for more than an hour. So thanks everyone for coming to our session. Thank you for the 14 of you, and I think maybe there's 3 of us that are. Yeah, I think
the screen share is considered a person, perhaps. Yep. So yeah.
So So thanks to the 11 of you that have stuck around for this long. We really appreciate you coming here. One last closing question, if you wanted to answer, is like, which parts of this were most interesting and compelling to you, and which parts would you want us to talk about more in the future? We're probably going to do a similar talk like this for Minibar coming up in early October, and we might just do the same thing, or we probably.
We definitely will
But if
not just do the same thing. So I think realistically, we're going to refine it. So yeah.
Yeah. Okay. Um, cool. Well, thanks everybody again for coming. This was great. I hope you got something out of it. I totally neglected to share the resources slide, but nobody explicitly asked. But
so here's links to many of the things that were referenced. So you have a moment here to like hit print screen, take a screenshot, whatever that key combination is on Macs, and just like save it locally. But lots of good stuff.
Command Shift 3, I think, is your screenshot. I
feel like Command Shift 4 is the one I used all the time because you can like cut a little thing out.
Yep.
Paul, I am not hiring because I don't work anywhere. I work for me. I like tried to be an honest woman for a minute and didn't love it. So yeah.
Surprise.
Yeah.
Okay, we're being recorded, so we're gonna end this call. And if hopefully folks hopefully this is a good use of time and you had a nice time. And hopefully there are ways to hopefully you got our contact info and you can follow up with us if you have questions. Joe, I think you and I and Eryn should definitely talk for a number of reasons, but independently of this. Yeah. So with that, thanks for coming. Bye. Bye, everybody.
Bye, friends.